All right, hello there. My name is Kevin Ustakile, and today I figured I would take the time to show you a new discovery I made personally on how to do theming with Tailwind CSS very easily. So as you can see here, we have a very standard create next app page. The only addition here I've made so far is a very slight tweak on the styling and a select in the middle, as you can tell. So everything is pretty much working the way it would when you run create next app by default. I ran it with the Tailwind example just to get Tailwind installed out of the gate without having me to set it up. So what I want to show here is that you can easily change theme. So in this case, I have three different ones. I have a light theme, a dark theme, and a custom theme. So light is what you're seeing currently. If we change this to dark, you'll see it changes all the elements to dark and it automatically adapts everything. You don't have to do anything beyond toggling this. And the same if I go for custom, and please, I apologize in advance for the poor choice of colors, but it just goes to show that you can use this for whatever you want. So yeah, it's not pretty. It's something out of the 90s on a bad day. But again, it goes to show that you can use whichever colors you want, and you can use as many themes as you want with this system. So basically what we're doing here is that we're utilizing CSS variables, which are super powerful if used correctly. So if we jump into the code, you can see here I have my root element specified on which I have the CSS variables for the light theme that I showed off to begin with. The naming of these variables can be whatever you want. In this case, I named mine this way: accent, content, background, foreground, and edge. So accent is the blue color you see here, and also when you highlight something or hover on something. Content is for all the text. Background is, as the name implies, the background. Foreground is the color of the cards, so this slight gray color. And edge is the border around the cards. Just to show what is possible here, I added those. And beneath that, you'll see I have some classes here called theme dash something. Now, of course, you can name this class whatever you want. I decided to go this way because I figured that was the easiest, at least in my opinion. You can do whatever you want. You'll see later how. So in here, I've taken the same variables and I'm just overriding the colors. So again, for dark, I'm just swapping a lot of these colors out for darker variants, except for the accent. I forgot to do that, but you know, you can see me changing that on the custom, and it works just fine. So that's pretty much it. One key as well is to make sure to apply at least the background on the body itself, otherwise the body won't change. You do it just by applying it like this, and keep in mind that this has to happen before you import your Tailwind utilities, at least in my experience. I didn't check whether or not all of them had to come in this order, but this is what worked for me. Feel free to experiment if you wish. So, and again, I'm using Next.js for this example, but you could use any React library if you want. There's really nothing Next specific in this. So if we take a look at the index for starters here, first of all, I'm importing a hook, a custom hook. I'll look at that later. But I'm defining my class names here for the various themes. So again, you can see it's the same names. Theme light, we don't actually have a class for that, but it's fine because we fall back to that default root value. So this is just for our own sanity, basically. But for theme dark and theme custom, we do have them here as well. And the reason, just for context, the reason why I'm extracting these into an object like this is so we can call them like this. That helps Tailwind, or rather Purge CSS, not purge these classes without us having to whitelist them, which we don't actually want in this case. So just a little key there. You could also install a package called class names to make this a bit easier or nicer, rather than use a template literal like this, but for this use case it works. So again, we call this use theme context hook that we've written. Again, I'll look at that in a little bit. From which we get theme and set theme. which is the same things you would get from like a use state. You know, you get the constant or the variable, and then a function to update the variable. And then after that, I'm defining an unhandled theme change that is purely to pass a function to that select we had before. We could probably just call set theme directly from there, but I extracted it so it's here at the top just for ease of mind. And as we saw, the class name here to add that overall arching theme. You could technically get rid of this. Actually, I believe I made a change so that, yes, I did make a change. Sorry, this is not entirely up to date. You can actually get rid of this because, as you'll see here, it'll still work. Because we're actually applying that class to the body element. I forgot about that. But if you scroll down, for example, here where we say Next.js, you can see I'm calling text accent. Before that would be like blue 500. But because we say text accent, it's going to take that accent color into account that we defined in our variables here. So that's the color it's going to use. We'll be adding that to our Tailwind config as well. And the same goes for the foreground, for the border edge that we define, and so on and so forth. You can use whatever you want. And just to, now that I spoke about the Tailwind config, let's show that. So what we do here is we define the same colors here as with the same names as we define in our variables. Again, you can name them differently if you want, but we do it this way, or at least I do it this way. On here, you instead of just calling directly to a string for defining the color, what you want to do instead is define a function that gets an opacity variable. This comes from Tailwind, and this ensures that you'll be able to include opacity classes with your colors. If you don't do this, the opacity CSS variable from Tailwind will not be included on the class it generates, meaning you can't use any of the opacity utilities that Tailwind offers. So this is a nice little tidbit I found out the hard way. So what you do here is you define an rgba, as you can see here, where we call that variable with the name we want, in this case accent, and then we use a slash, and then we get the var, and then we pass in the opacity variable. And that's essentially it. Now we have Tailwind generating a class with the variable that we defined, as well as the opacity if so desired. Again, if we don't use the opacity, it's just going to be 1 by default, so everything is good to go. So that's the CSS part basically. So now last bit is we have this custom hook or context. In my case, I called it use theme. I also have to apologize for using plain JavaScript here. Normally, I would highly encourage to write this in TypeScript, but for the ease of this demonstration, I'm just going to do it in JavaScript. That's what the installer gave me. So we do some default imports here. Not default imports, but some imports that we'll need, and then we define the context here. So on here again we have a variable with the default theme. In this case, the default will be light, and we have a function called setTheme, which we don't do anything with here. Then we create our context, and then we create a hook for using the context. So what we're doing here is we call the context with the context we defined just before, and if no context is found, that means that we're using the hook outside of the context provider, which we're throwing errors for here to make sure we don't break anything. And this is where the magic happens. We have a use effect which is overriding whichever CSS class you have in the body, which there's probably a better way of dealing with, but for this demonstration it works. Again, feel free to come up with your own solution for this, but this worked for me. So here we're just setting some transitions just for the colors. In our case, we set up a curve for how it should ease in and out, and a duration for that. So in this case, the color change will happen over 200 milliseconds. And then we add a class for the theme, and then we pass in the theme here. So that's the theme we'll add. So in our case, it'll be theme light, theme dark, or theme custom. And then we'll return the context at the end. And lastly, we have a theme provider, which we're just using a use state in, which we're passing to our theme context provider. so we get access to those values, so that the client doesn't have to do anything. And that's the context / hook. We're calling it like so. So we import it on the app.js. We import the provider. We wrap everything we have within that provider, so it's available at all levels. And in here in the index again, we just call it like this. I realize we're not actually using the variable theme here, but you could want to use it in certain cases. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That gives you a pretty customizable theming ability within Tailwind without having to generate classes for each specific theme. It's retaining the same class. So far, I've not encountered any downsides to this. There might be some, I don't know. I just discovered this method a few days ago, but feel free to let me know what you think, and thank you so much for watching.